Welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel, where I react to UFC news and live events. So I kindly ask that you hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that will really help this channel grow. And to ensure that you don't skip a beat, feel free to click the notification bell. That way you can guarantee that you don't miss any of the action. I really hope you enjoy this. We are a month and a couple of days away from UFC 314. Potentially the best, I'm gonna say it. The best pay-per-view event of 2025. Do not care whether it's prematurely predicted, and do not care. They would have to schedule Conor McGregor versus Khabib for the second time to be able to compete with this pay-per-view event. It is insane. Due to the fact that it feels like, whether you are looking on the prelims or on the main card, it feels like there is a potential fight of the night in almost every single fight. If you think I'm exaggerating, quickly listen to the names that I would throw your way with potential fight of the night performances and fights. Alright, are you ready for this? First off, now, might not be as big, but still has the potential. Yao Xiaonan versus Verna Yanderova, potentially a #1 contender bout to see who faces Zhang Weiying next for the strawweight women's championship of the UFC. How about Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes? Jeff Neal versus Carlos Prates, one of the fighting nerds. Now, I don't know, with regards to the fighting nerds, I don't know whether they planned on doing this or whether it's just a coincidence. All of them are in different weight classes. Do not know. We have Sayo Baralho at middleweight, Carlos Prates at welterweight, Mauricio Ruffi at lightweight, Gene Silva at featherweight. If it's a coincidence, fair. If they planned it, well done. Well done. We have Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Lord Silva. For some reason, a lot of animosity between Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva, probably due to the controversial things that Bryce Mitchell has said. And Gene Silva would like to get a piece of Bryce Mitchell. Now, don't know whether Bryce is aware or fully aware of what happened the last time he fought someone with this amount of power. Because we all saw it. We all witnessed it firsthand, where we saw Bryce blocking an overhand right with his head, and probably only woke up a few months ago. And the possibility of that happening again, it's there. Right? Gene Silva packs power. The man's fists do the talking. When he has on his glasses, he looks somewhat innocent, and then he takes them off. The man turns into a full-blown psychopath. And then moving on to, obviously, the talk of the town with regards to headlining fights, where we have Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. Patricio Pitbull, who is making his UFC debut. Now, let's be honest, full transparency here, UFC probably should have signed him 5 years ago, when he was in his prime, when he was at the peak of his powers. But due to the fact that he was the king of Bellator at the time, Bellator would have never released him, would have never had him go to the UFC in his prime. So we have Patricio Pitbull coming off of 2 losses, one versus Sergio Perez, Anthony's brother, in Bellator, and then one he had in Ryzen, fighting Yair Rodriguez, who, even though Yair is an insane kickboxer, probably has one of the best kicks in the UFC, is a really good fighter and really fun to watch. Yair has some imperfections. Yair Rodriguez is also coming off of 2 losses, where he obviously beat Josh Emmett for the interim featherweight championship, fought Volkanovski, ended up losing, then fought T-City, ended up losing once again. But the main topic of discussion with regards to Yair Rodriguez is the fact that in 5.5 years, Yair has had 5 fights. So, not the most active fighter on the roster. Not the most activity pertaining to Yair Rodriguez and the UFC. But with that being said, going to be an insane fight due to the fact that Yair is one of the best kickboxers in the UFC. Patricia Pitbull is, all in all, a really good, well-rounded fighter, is comfortable wherever the fight takes place. He is exceptional. Don't know how much age is waning on him right now due to the fact that, as I previously mentioned, not in his prime anymore. Maybe he has the Volkanovski effect, where feels like wine and gets better over time. The Yoel Romero substance. We'll see. However, should be an intriguing fight to watch. Then in the co-main event, Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. Now, if you have a friend that, for some reason, dislikes Michael Chandler, and they ask you, why is Michael Chandler still inside of the UFC, seeing that out of his last 5 fights, he has only managed to win once. You have a few things that you could probably show that person. You could show them this. You could show them this. You could then further go on to exaggerate your point. You can show them this, and then you can show them this, and then if you want to put an exclamation mark on this, you can show them this, and you can also show them this. Okay, Michael Chandler is must-watch blockbuster cinema. Whenever he fights, you're bound to see something that you probably won't see in any other UFC fight. You will see fists flying constantly. You will see 100% hard, 0% fight IQ. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what is required of Michael Chandler to actually win a fight. He would go against every single instinct and do the complete opposite just to entertain the fans. I do not care what anyone says. Michael Chandler's fights are incredible, and would tune in to see Michael Chandler fight if he had to fight every single weekend of the year. And this would probably be no different. And we know Michael Chandler's career within the UFC. It doesn't make for good viewing if you just look at the amount of wins and the amount of losses. He has had 6 fights inside of the UFC. He's won 2 of them, lost 4 of them. Obviously went on to beat Dan Hooker in his debut, lost 2 in a row, beat Tony Ferguson, and then went on to lose 2 in a row once again. But never seen a guy whose stock has increased as exponentially as Michael Chandler's stock has increased after his loss versus Charles Oliveira the second time, where it felt like in that fight, Charles Oliveira had multiple opportunities to be able to submit Michael Chandler, and either by the grace of God or something Michael Chandler knows that we don't, Michael avoided every single one of them, where in one instance Charles was on Michael's back, was looking for a rear naked choke, and then Charles got dumped on his own back while being on Chandler's back. Wait, Michael Chandler basically jumped with Charles Oliveira on his back, landed on Charles's back, and then, if anyone missed it, Chandler decided he would stand up and do it again. It was insane. And this fight will be no different. Fighting Paddy Pimblett, and for Paddy, in his last outing in the UFC, got an impressive win over Bobby Green. Was weird seeing Bobby Green shoot for a takedown just to get submitted directly after said shot. But an important fight for Paddy Pimblett due to the fact that prior to the Bobby Green fight, he fought Tony Ferguson in what was an underwhelming performance, fighting an old Tony Ferguson who has lost possibly every single fight in a row, and Paddy wasn't able to end him, to win via stoppage. Prior to that fight, Paddy Pimblett fought Jared Gordon in what feels like a lot of people's consensus that Paddy Pimblett actually lost that fight against Jared Gordon. And if I'm being honest, being a Paddy fan, I tend to agree with them. Do honestly think that Paddy Pimblett lost that fight against Jared Gordon. However, the official result is in. Paddy is still undefeated within the UFC, 6-fight winning streak. Fighting a guy like Michael Chandler, I don't think it's really a good matchup for Paddy. Seeing that Chandler is not the easiest guy to take down, do not think Paddy would actually want to stand and bang with Michael Chandler. Do not think that would be his road to victory. Seeing that Paddy is really good on the ground, he's a really big submission threat, would probably look to finish the fight via submission, but for that to happen would have to exchange or rather initiate wrestling exchanges, grappling exchanges, maybe try and wear Chandler out to take him down. However, I don't think it's gonna be that easy, and I do think that maybe Paddy would walk into something that he's not fully prepared to eat, and possibly get swept and get his doors absolutely blasted off. Now that's not an early prediction. That is just a hypothetical situation that I could possibly see happening. And then in the main event, where Alexander Volkanovski is taking on Diego Lopes for the vacant featherweight championship of the UFC. So Ilia Topuria vacated his featherweight belt, went on to move up to lightweight, and therefore we have Alexander Volkanovski fighting Diego Lopes for that vacant belt. Now, opposite run of form with regards to both respective fighters, where Diego Lopes is on a 5-fight winning streak, Volk is on a 2-fight losing streak. However, with that being said, anything could happen obviously, but I do think that this fight could potentially play into Volk's hands. If we look at Diego Lopes, sure, he is a devastating striker, sure, he is a good, well-rounded fighter, but if ever he had a weakness, it would probably be wrestling. And not just wrestling, also the fact that it feels like Diego Lopes tends to tire in the latter rounds of a fight, where we saw him versus Brian Ortega in his previous fight, probably one of the weirdest things you would see in your life, where he knocked out Brian Ortega, and while Brian was falling to the ground, Diego caught him, I think, if I remember correctly, caught him with a right hook, basically knocking him back to consciousness. So he knocked him out, but then when he connected again, it looked like he woke Brian up. It was insane. Anyway, going to a unanimous decision victory over Brian Ortega. However, it felt like in the third round he was really slowing down. The same happened when he fought Dan Ige. I do think that might be a problem, a raise for concern, if you will, with regards to Diego Lopes. And I do think Volk is the type of person to expose that. Basically, weather the storm in the first 2 rounds. Start with having some grappling exchanges. Start with initiating some wrestling exchanges. Basically shooting for takedowns, or just feigning for them. Give Diego a lot to think about. Wear Diego down. I think Volk could actually do that, and I do think that there is a clear road to victory for Alexander Volkanovski in this fight. We've seen him against guys that doesn't have the best wrestling defense. We saw it against Yair Rodriguez. We saw Volk against Brian Ortega. He tends to use every ounce of his skill set whenever he fights, and I do think that it will be no different if he fights Diego Lopes. If this fight goes further than 2 rounds, I think Volkanovski might stand a considerable chance at beating Diego Lopes. But I mean, the amount of fights that could potentially be absolute cinema, it is insane. I cannot remember the last time I've seen a card like this, where from the early prelims would probably start fixating my eyes on the television screen. It is going to be insane. Let me know in the comment section which fight interests you the most, which fight are you most excited to see, and which fight do you think would probably end up being the fight of the night.